Hello, everyone, and welcome. And we are here again with the Care Workers Charity for the Care Workers Hour. So this is where we're spending a whole hour allowing ourselves to listen to care workers and to understand what's going on with the Care Workers Charity, which of course supports care workers. And today we are going to be looking at mental health, mental well-being, which is so important in the care workforce. So there is a fantastic well-being report that the Care Workers Charity did in 2025 last year, and we'll be delving into some of the statistics around that, which are going to be really interesting. We're going to do the normal format that we did last time, and thank you so much to everyone who tuned into that. And that was all to do around fuel cost and really seeing it from the perspective of people who are delivering care services. So if you want to watch that back, then you can do. It's on our YouTube channel, so you can just subscribe to us and follow us, look at our videos, look at our lives. It's all there on lives. We're doing this as a live stream. So make sure that you do tune into that. And of course, stay active. If you are looking and watching this live, then you can just pop something into the chat. You can, any perspective that you might have, any thought you might have, we want to hear it. So make sure that you do that and keep it a vibrant chat. So I'm going to invite the wonderful Olivia Firth from the Care Workers Charity to come in and talk about what they're doing at the moment, the Care Workers Charity, and also to talk about some of the things in the report. But I wanted to just highlight some stuff just to get people thinking. Maybe you've got some thoughts about statistics and experiences that maybe you've had or you've seen that other people have gone through who work in care. So one of them is around what people say in their own words, which I think is one of the gifts of the Care Workers Charity. They get the perspectives of people, and they do actually not really filter it at all, but they absolutely portray that, and I think that's really important. So people just talking about financial well-being. Obviously there's different types of well-being. One person said in their report, I work 60 hours a week, including travel between clients to be able to afford what I need. It's a lot of my life dedicated to paying bills. Someone else talking about mental well-being. I think people forget we spend all day caring for people, and it can be hard to then care for yourself when you're always putting others' needs above your own. Now, that's just really does resonate. And I'm going to zoom down to somebody talking about experiences of working in care. And they're saying, working in care has been the most rewarding career in my working life. Knowing that you are making a change to every person you care for is the best feeling. So you've got some of the challenges there, and you've got some of the positives as well. So really recognizing that care workers do what they do because they absolutely love it. But of course, there are some issues with well-being that go with that. And I suppose the question we should probably ask ourselves is, are we doing enough to recognise the well-being challenges that care workers face? What more could employers do? What more could our policymakers do? Obviously, with Andy Burnham now in place and putting social care firmly on the political agenda, what things should we be asking for from our elected politicians, from the decision makers, and maybe even from our local authorities and care association? So those are some thoughts. Maybe you have some opinions on that already. Pop those in the chat. I'd love to hear them. But without further ado, I do have more statistics I could share, but I really want to bring Olivia in, and maybe we'll come back to those later. So there we are. Hello, Olivia. How are you today?
Hello, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm a little bit rushed because, as you can see, I've got a different background today. I'm actually at a training day around, it's actually more of a workshop on AI and how to use that. So I'm sorting up because we'll be doing our own AI conference and set of workshops in the new year. So a lot to learn.
Definitely.
So we're here today about well-being. And first of all, before we delve into it, I'd love to hear some of the things that are going on in the Care Workers Charity at the moment. And then maybe you might want to talk a little bit about the report. So yeah, over to you, Olivia.
Yeah, of course, and thank you so much for having me. So, at the moment, at the Care Workers Charity, we do actually have our 2026 Care Worker Wellbeing Survey up and running for responses. Last year, obviously, I'll speak more about the report, but last year we had over 2,000 responses from care workers across the UK. So it gave us a really comprehensive view on what care workers were experiencing, whether that was with financial well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, etc. So we're really encouraging and wanting care workers to respond to this survey because the more insights that we can gather, the greater our chance of influencing policy is that is led by care workers' voices, because those are the people that also need to be in the room, when these discussions and decisions are happening. We're also setting up for Professional Care Workers Week, taking place in September. We've got some really exciting panels, whether that's kind of looking ahead and how care workers can build a career in care, whether that's looking at the rights of migrant care workers, especially given the recent Home Office proposals. We've also got some other exciting panels on delegated healthcare activities, on inclusivity and diversity in the care workforce. So that's coming up in September. And also as well, actually yesterday, we had an in-person roundtable with care workers that was titled Inclusive Care, Better Futures. So we were really looking at some of the, I guess, more taboo subjects in the sector that are still very important in their own right. So we were looking at, for example, LGBTQIA plus experiences in care, neurodiversity in care, racial equity and representation, and also the sexual safety of the care workforce.
Like you said, building long-term futures in care, so that wider strategic view. And then you've also got talks around understanding the fair pay agreement, how care workers can influence change. And then when there's talks about tech, but also well-being. So that's really
Yep.
helpful. And I like the idea of your talk about the economic and emotional cost of bereavement in care, because bereavement, it's an inevitable thing that you might have to come across no matter who you support in care. But it's really important that people understand how to deal with it and what the cost is, because sometimes that goes under recognize, I think. So that's really good talks there for people to get involved with. And talk to me a bit about the Moonlight Walk, because I still do want to get involved, but I haven't signed up yet. But I do want to.
Yes, so like I said, we have various kind of fundraising efforts throughout the year, and the Moonlight Walk. So it's through London, and it takes you across some of the really beautiful sights of London. You can do a 10-kilometre walk or a 10-mile walk. I will be doing the 10-mile walk, so I've got to get my hiking boots ready and locked in. And essentially it's a day of coming together of community, all in the aim of raising funds for the CWC. And like I said, all of the money that is raised goes directly to supporting paid adult social care workers, whether that's through our financial crisis grants for care workers, or the mental health and wellbeing support that we offer to care workers through our partnership with Red Umbrella.
Great. I was just trying to find a link to that. Was it link? Or link to that walk, and I'm going to pop that into the chat as well, because it's something that people can find out more about, and they can actually. Is it too late to sign up to actually take part in it and raise funds?
No, it's not too late to sign up. There's still some time. I believe that the sign up closes in a couple of weeks, I want to say.
Okay.
So yes, there's still a chance to sign up.
Good. Let's make sure that we do that. So that was really helpful to get a little bit of update about the Care Workers Charity and what you're doing at the moment. Of course, people can always support it, they can fundraise for it, they can also donate. So we're always looking for people to do that. And if you go onto the website, we've got lots of links in the chat. You can find out ways to do that very easily. Did you want to talk a little bit about the report, introduce it a bit more, and then we will go over to talk to Liz about her experiences?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Thank you.
Great.
So yes, just kind of like a little bit of background about the report. So we launched the survey because we really wanted to learn from care workers about their experiences. So last year, the survey was focused on financial well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, perceptions of social care, and then also kind of the time. So asking people about their experiences with the cost of living crisis, or kind of like their current thoughts or the thoughts on the current government at the time. And we garnered responses from over 2,000 care workers across the UK. To focus a little bit more on mental well-being, you know, we always preface with that mental well-being should be understood as more than just the absence of mental health conditions. It encompasses factors such as job satisfaction or a sense of purpose, access to adequate mental health support, opportunities for rest and recovery, and the ability to maintain a work-life balance. But crucially, it also relies on working environments that foster safety, you know, where care workers feel respected and empowered to voice their concerns, you know, without that fear of repercussion. You know, something that we spoke about in the last Care Workers Hour, and we will continue to bang the drum on, is that, you know, care work demands skill, professionalism, responsibility, risk, technical expertise, but it also demands significant emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, empathy, and adaptability. And the reality of working in adult social care frequently presents significant challenges, you know, to achieving a good standard of mental well-being. Our initial findings from the report, you know, exposed high workloads, low pay, long working hours, staffing pressures, and exposure to, you know, emotionally challenging situations that were a significant problem for the adult social care workforce. But then we also have to recognise the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing cost of living crisis that intensifies these pressures. And, you know, really recognising that a crisis is often intersectional and that there are multiple factors at play that will impact an individual's mental well-being. I think it's really important to recognise that we have seen encouraging progress in recognising the importance of the adult social care workforce well-being. However, what we do know through our direct engagement with care workers is that this access to support remains quite inconsistent across the sector. Just to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the stats. So 42.1% of our respondents either strongly agreed or agreed that they had been feeling unhappy or depressed recently, with 34.33% either strongly agreeing or agreeing that their job negatively affected their mental health. But perhaps most interesting from that was that just over half, so 52.63% of our respondents believed that there was adequate mental health support available in their workplace. So again, that really points to the lack of standardised support for care workers. When it comes to accessing support or therapy, 15.81% said that they had or were currently accessing therapy services. Now, that was either through their employer or an external organisation. But perhaps most interestingly, 17.06% indicated that they hadn't sought therapy simply because they didn't know where to find appropriate support. And I think kind of touching on our mental health and wellbeing support that we offer through our partnership with Red Umbrella, you know, that was really born from the fact that, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, care workers were telling us that they were burnt out, they were grieving, and they didn't necessarily know where to go. And also what we do know as well is that a lot of the waiting lists for NHS therapy are incredibly long. And, you know, a mental health crisis is something that requires immediate attention and intervention. So that's really what led us to kind of launched that partnership with Red Umbrella, where care workers can access 10 free counselling sessions at no cost to them. When it comes to mental well-being, a little bit as well, what I said at the beginning was that it also encompasses being able to voice your opinion, share your experiences in a safe environment. So one of the most interesting points was that 58.6% of our respondents either strongly agreed or agreed that they could voice their opinions and influence change at work. But then on the flip side of that, we have 18.24% of our respondents who said that they strongly disagreed or disagreed that they are actively involved in the decisions that affect their role, with a further 25.38% neither agreeing or disagreeing. I think one of the things as well that's really, really integral to mental well-being is the relationships that we have, whether that's personal or professional. And it's, again, really interesting to see the differences in statistics when it comes to care workers' experiences of relationships that they have with those who are drawing on care and support versus relationships that they have with colleagues or managers. So 87.51% of our respondents either strongly agreed or agreed that their relationships with those they care and support for were as positive as they would like. However, when we then look at the statistics on the professional relationships with colleagues, we then see a drop of about 10.95%, with 76.56% of our respondents either strongly agreeing or agreeing that their professional relationships with colleagues were as positive as they would like. Again, one of the things that I touched on earlier as well was this element of work-life balance. You know, we've already touched upon the fact that, you know, care workers told us that their job was negatively impacting their mental health. And we also learned from care workers as well that they often worry about work outside of their working hours. But it was really interesting to note that 21% of our respondents either strongly disagreed or disagreed that their line manager actively promoted flexible working arrangements, with 52.63% actually then agreeing that their employer provided facilities and flexibilities to support family life. And I think it kind of goes back to, you know, the conversation that we had last time, which is that, you know, care workers are human too. They have their own lives outside of their working lives, whether that's children that they care for, loved ones that they care for, but even just being able to look after themselves as well is really important. I think one of the things that we really wanted to highlight as well was that 87.03% of our respondents either strongly agreed or agreed that they are able to make a difference through their work. You know, and this alone just highlights the sense of purpose and commitment that adult social care workers have, despite the pressures that they face. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to that element of, and it's quite a convoluted sentence now that I think of it, but care workers care because they care. You know, it's in their nature to care. But we can't take advantage of that care. You know, we need to ensure that care workers have adequate protections in the workplace. But they also have access to adequate mental health support, you know, because care workers are carrying a lot on their shoulders, and oftentimes when things go wrong, again, that's a burden that falls onto the care workers' shoulders. So we just really need to make sure that we are opening up that dialogue for care workers to be able to be open and honest about their mental health and about their experiences, and then in turn making sure that that support is in place, you know, because we can't expect care workers to go out and deliver outstanding care if they themselves are not cared for. You know, I know that you kind of highlighted some of the quotes that we had from our wellbeing survey. And I'm very aware that I've spoken a lot about statistics, but, you know, one of the things that we will always say and highlight and champion at the Care Workers Charity is that behind these statistics are real people with real lives and real experiences. So just to highlight, you know, kind of some of the quotes that we received, you touched on a couple of them earlier. One individual said, I think people forget we spend all day caring for people, and it can be hard to then care for yourself when you're always putting others' needs above your own. I love my job, but it can be difficult when you develop personal relationships with the people you care for. You feel their moods with them, and it can be really difficult when you're having a bad day yourself. Another individual said, there are so many challenges in the sector. We have never had a chance to recover. The pressures and external burdens around funding, low wages, and the cycle that this has on team morale and well-being is significant. There is a significant lack of support and acknowledgement from the government and society. Reform is desperately needed. And just finally, to highlight as well, one individual said, mental health is crucial in social care as the role often involves high emotional demands, long hours, and intense situations that can impact well-being. Employers should prioritise mental health support by offering regular well-being check-ins, access to counselling services, and structured debriefing sessions for individuals dealing with stressful situations.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's actually beautiful to end on a note that focuses on the voices of some people who have actually contributed to the report. And it
Mm-hmm.
just really, it really touches your heart to think about there are people behind the ones, well, behind the care. And the
Yes.
care is affecting them just as it would any other human being. People can't shut off their emotions entirely. Obviously, you can try, and as you deal more with more things and you deal with more bereavement, you do learn coping mechanisms. But it's what happens when those coping mechanisms are entirely internal, and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
somebody or some support outside of that, which is wonderful that the Care Workers Charity actually does have that opportunity for people to access it through those counselling sessions. So that's a fallback, if you like. That's a resource, which is why it's so important for people to actually fund and support the Care Workers Charity, so it can do more of that kind of stuff. But also, there's important things that providers can do within their own organisations, even if it's to recognise the stress that care workers might be holding, unbeknownst to themselves, or maybe to the managers. They're dealing with lots of other things, but actually there needs to be mechanisms within the organisation to support care workers, and not all organisations have the resources to do that. And I just wonder, as a reflection, whether you think there should be more done centrally, because I don't know how much support the NHS gives its employees, but I think within social care it can be quite variable. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what would be the ask that you would be putting forward to the big conversation about care to Andy Burnham and his team around mental well-being for the care workforce.
Yeah, of course, and it's a really important question. One of the things that we have always said is that there needs to be funding for adequate mental health support for care workers to be standardised across the sector. You know, a there shouldn't be a worry based on where you work as to whether you can then access, mental health support services. And you're quite right in saying that not every organisation has the resources to be able to do that. So if we then actually create a pot of funding that is dedicated to getting mental health and wellbeing support standardised across the sector so that every care worker can access if needed, that is one of the big asks that we have. Because like you touched upon, there's so much in a day that care workers experience, and I know that we're going to be hearing a little bit from Liz about it, but just to bring my own experience into it. So before joining the Care Workers Charity, I was a care worker myself, and I've had experiences in both residential and domiciliary settings. And it was mainly delivering dementia and palliative care. So there was a lot of grief, a lot of death involved in that. And I remember very vividly, I was delivering care and support to an individual with a cancer diagnosis. And it was very clear that they were coming to the end of their life. And they actually passed away in the evening before I then came in for my shift that morning. And I remember going in to try and check in on them. I wasn't told that they had passed away during the evening. And, I kind of asked around and said, oh, what happened? And they went, oh, they passed away. And there was no support that was offered, given the fact that, myself and other colleagues were their main kind of, care and support worker. And it was very much a case of, we need to get somebody else in that room now. So there wasn't that, kind of understanding that we knew this person inside out. We knew exactly what they needed when they needed it. We had these wonderful conversations and built these relationships that were really centered around being human. And the grief that came with that. And you take that home with you at the end of the day, because these are people that you end up caring for and supporting for like they are a family member. You know them like the back of your hand. So yes, I think our ask is to really prioritize funding for access to adequate mental health and wellbeing support for care workers, to ensure that they are fully supported, whatever their work or even life outside of work throws at them, because that's also really important to recognize as well.
Absolutely. And I think because we're so nervous about CQC, we're so nervous about safeguarding, we're so nervous about the professional responsibilities we've got to abide by when we're doing care, that sometimes it's really difficult, I think, for managers and seniors to then sit down and say, let's talk about it. Shall we, what should we do? Have we got like a memory tree, or how are we going to remember that person? And sometimes because of the nature of care work, when you've got quite a high turnover, of people either coming for respite or either passing, and that need to also balance that out with the fact that because care fees can be quite challenging, you do need to ensure that you do have that bed filled. So there's just so many competing issues around it.
Yeah.
I think this is a really helpful conversation as part of the whole well-being conversation, because the well-being is sometimes we're not addressing that properly because there's so many other different things that are pulling on care managers. And actually we do need to somehow operationalize compassion for our care staff and support for them. So like you say, if we could make that standard, if we can make that support there, then care providers don't have to think about how on earth am I going to fund this or create time for this. Actually, it's a resource that can be pulled from, like what you've got with the counselling with the care workers charity. But if we could do more of that, that would be fantastic. So thank you for sharing that. Any final thoughts before
Absolutely.
we bring Liz in?
I don't. I was just thinking. I think also part of it as well is that as a society, we're getting better, but we're still quite uncomfortable with talking about mental health and well-being, and actually kind of opening the floor to have these discussions, even if it's a simple thing of, you don't seem yourself today, how are you? Even in passing, we go, oh, how are you doing? It's, oh, I'm okay, thank you, how are you? It's very kind of, I guess it's not very deep, and then trying to get to it. And I think also as well, kind of touching on grief, it's something that affects us all, whether that's in our personal lives, our working lives. And again, it's just something we're not very good at talking about. So I think that's why it's so important to hear from Liz, about her experiences, because just opening up the floor to have that starting discussion can open more doors. And it's only ever a good thing to actually engage with one another, to talk about mental health, to check in with each other, because then I think it also makes us feel a little less lonely as well.
Absolutely, a little less lonely, 100%, and it can feel lonely even if you're surrounded by colleagues. So thank you for sharing that. That was a really good introduction, and we actually went a little bit deeper into it, which I think was really helpful. So I'm going to say goodbye to you just for the moment, and I'm going to bring in
Of
Liz,
course.
and maybe we'll have a chat afterwards. Great. See you shortly. So, hello, Liz. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to just unmute you if I can. Oh, you might need to. There we are. Lovely.
Nice, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It would be really, really good if we could just start off by you explaining who you are and what your role is within care.
Yeah, so my name's Lizzie Cox, and at the moment I'm a support worker for adults with learning difficulties and autism.
Great, thank you for that. And obviously, part of what we're doing with this Care Workers Hour is we are talking directly to care workers to share their experiences on a particular topic. And mental well-being, as we've just seen with such a conversation that veered off into different avenues with Olivia, mental well-being is a big one. So I appreciate you coming on to share your thoughts and experiences on that with us.
Yeah,
The floor is really yours for a little bit on this subject. The only thing I might ask is, what does mental well-being look like for you in your role?
yeah, I suppose. Well, mental health well-being is so important because, as the old adage goes, you can't serve from an empty vessel. So, what you Olivia was talking about, and you were talking about, as in burnout from COVID and other stressors from it's really hard to give the best care possible, and surely that is something that the employers would want as well as the employees, to give the best care possible when you're stretched and suffering yourself. So it is a very important subject because it affects how you feel. It might not affect the quality of care, but you are eventually going to get burnout if you don't address the issues. So yeah, it's the stigma behind mental health as well is quite large still. You'd hope that things had changed in the last, how long have I been working in care and nursing? About 30 years. You'd hope that things had changed and moved forward, but in some ways they haven't. And also the stresses that people are facing have got worse. With COVID, I had a friend of mine who's a carer who was doing care in the community, domiciliary care at the time, and she was told she couldn't shield because she's got a daughter with learning difficulties and a daughter with celiac disease. She couldn't shield because they didn't qualify, so she had to go into work and put her daughters at risk. Another friend who was a carer in a care home, she said that she couldn't go and see her best friend who died of COVID because she was in a bubble with those at work. So I think a lot of what's happened and the sacrifices we've made during COVID have gone by the by now. People want to move on with their lives, and I understand that. But at the same time, we're always the ones that are picking up the slack and just dealing with not only our suffering, but the suffering of the people we support, because a lot of their cohort died and stuff. So, yeah.
I think you've hit a nail on the head, and it's been bothering me these last couple of days. And I was saying it to a friend last night, but they didn't quite get it because they don't work in care. And I was just explaining how it's just dawned on me a few years ago, we were in lockdown. We were probably in one of the most incredible, historic events of certainly our lifetimes. And I would say of, very many, because it was a whole, I mean, wars are awful, but they tend to affect just a certain population at the time. This affected the whole world. There wasn't a bit
Yeah.
of the world that wasn't affected by it, really. And there are care workers everywhere. And we took on so much of the burden, like you say. And I don't think, in this conversation about mental well-being, I don't think there's a full accounting and appreciation of what care workers did and what they went through, and how actually we haven't really had time to heal and to reflect, and then we are launching pretty much straight back into business as usual. So you've got that, cumulative stress that's probably internalized somehow, plus the lack of recognition for ongoing well-being. And I think it's really, maybe it is symptomatic of the point that we don't really value or
Yeah.
recognize well-being within care as much as we should do.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to know, sort of in your experience as being a care worker for so many years, have you got experiences of where well-being has been appreciated and maybe where it hasn't?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, so to give you a bit of background from me, I was a carer when I left school, and then I went into office work, and then I decided to go into nursing. Um, go to university and study nursing at 30 years old. So I went and did it. I would say some of the negative experiences that I've got with people understanding any support that I might need was during working for the NHS, believe it or not, and they should really be the best, but it wasn't. My current employer, a charity that works with people with learning disabilities and autism, as I said, have a mental well-being spokesperson that's in charge of it, and they do amazing things like lunchtime walks, yoga sessions. We've all qualified. There's so many mental health first aiders qualified. We've all done the courses. They're really forward thinking in that respect, which is a breath of fresh air because it doesn't happen a lot.
What do you feel out of those things that are being done with it, with your fantastic employer, it seems, that have worked the most, and why do you think that has? Have you been on anything that you've come away thinking, oh, I just needed that?
Yeah, so I guess probably the things that I have enjoyed the most, because when I was nursing, I let my pin go, and then I trained in reflexology, Reiki, and massage. So I've got a lot in my toolkit, a lot. And the mental health first aider stuff was really useful to be able to understand how to have conversations with other colleagues, because I'm not a trained therapist, but as a therapist, a holistic therapist, I did end up talking to a lot of people, as you know, your hairdresser does, or your beautician does. You know, you chat away about people's lives and stuff. And I found that the mental health first aider training was really useful to be able to be a support to other friends, because like we say, not only is mental health stigmatized in the whole of the country and the whole of the world, really, it's stigmatized within the workplace of caring even more, because we're responsible adults. We are so responsible. People outside in the world may not know that, but we know how much responsibility we have. And so other staff members, if they thought you weren't coping, or if they thought there was some mental health problem there, they may well feel like, oh, should she be doing this job, you know, kind of thing. And a negative attitude towards opening up. The stigma is still very much real for everyday people. So and especially in care working, because we're responsible for other people's lives as part of our job. So I understand the stigma and I understand the problems that there are, but I feel that, you know, having a mental health spokesperson or like lead in a big organization is hugely helpful, because they can concentrate on all the things that help people. For me, and I've had to introduce myself on our online blog, because after I did my mental health first aid training, and just give an insight into what helps me. And I just use a really silly thing. Well, it's not silly, but it's what I use. I've got aromatherapy beads. So they're lava beads.
Oh,
And I put
lovely.
a little bit of whatever essential oil I'm working with on the lava beads. And when I'm really stressed or really like working hard, I just take a breathe, and for 5 seconds, even if you just take quarter of an hour out of your day as a carer, not quarter of an hour, what am I trying to say? 5 minutes out of your day in the car between clients or in the staff room, to just breathe, absolutely just slow down and say, okay, I'm breathing now, and just breathe out for longer than you breathe in, kind of thing, and just really regain grounding and strength, because it is such a busy job. And we're like octopuses, aren't we? We're doing this thing, that thing, this thing, that thing. And we tend to be a bit wobbly by the end of the shift. Of course we would. And so, yeah, grounding techniques are really important. Also, I find that that debriefing is not offered enough. Debriefing after COVID, debriefing after traumatic experiences. You know, I've seen people, I know we're not paramedics, but I've walked in on people who are dead. I've walked in on people having a traumatic death with their, when I was a nurse, with the person's mum asking me if I could give more morphine to finish his life because she didn't want to see him suffering. That was hugely stressful, and I got no debriefing from my boss. So yeah, some of the stuff that we see, we are alongside these people in their lives. We are walking alongside them, you know, and some of the things we see and experience as part of our role really does need some decent, robust debriefing at the end of the care period, at the end of, or even just at the end of a tough shift, just to know you can talk for 5 minutes to someone. It doesn't have to be a long time.
That is so insightful. I'm so glad I asked a question in that way. I love the beads and the holistic side of things. But what strikes me is some of the things that you've offered as way of feedback on things that help. They are they have absolutely no cost to them. They have
Yeah.
absolutely, so there's really no excuse not to tap into this, to have in every single care organization a mental health advocate, somebody who has a profile. Maybe they have a little bit of extra time, maybe an hour a month or something, to just set out how they might try and support things, bring things together, organize something, and then just offering it out. It doesn't even have to be within working hours. It could be something like the fundraising stuff that the Care Workers charity does, a walk, knitting. We have knit in that in our organization, and things like that. It just really helps people with their mental well-being, and it's really nice to hear it from you to say that these things work and these things help. And I definitely think the debriefing, sometimes people feel it might be well, that's an extra thing we don't really need to do. We've got much more important things to do, but it's so vital. And also it really affects the quality of care. I think you said at the beginning whether it does. I think it 100% does, because I've seen people really fail themselves and cut corners, not because they're not good care workers, not because they don't care, but because they're just overwhelmed and they've been asked to do 5 different things in 1 minute and be in 2 different places, and they're not quite sure how to say no to a manager or a senior because time is tight, and they just try and cut corners. So and it's
That's the other
overwhelming.
thing I was talking about, is boundary setting. As a person, as a carer, now I'm a bit older, and I've gone back into care work, and I'm very much like, no, boundary setting is important for me. I can do these shifts, I can't do those. I can help out if you need me, but you'll always have to run it past me, because I don't fall. I say, in my opinion, my political opinion, the whole of the NHS and the social care sector is run on the goodwill of the staff. And unfortunately, it's not that I don't have goodwill anymore, I absolutely do, but I'm not willing to push myself to the limit, so that, because that's not fair on the people I'm supporting either. So yeah, I think I don't know really. I think that it's really important that we have things in place for us to be able to debrief and de-stress and ground and know what we're doing, but also making management aware of what your boundaries are. And doesn't come naturally at all to carers and nurses, because we are people who, I remember sitting in a lecture once, and one of the lecturers said, you're doing nursing as a degree, there is nothing that's purely altruistic. You get something back from it. And we do. We get a sense of community, a sense of doing something good, a sense of being a good person, of doing the right thing. A lot of the people that we care for are very, very grateful. Some aren't, some get grumpy and whatever, but that's just life. But a lot of the people that we care for are really lovely people and very grateful. And I just feel that we need to cut ourselves some slack and just say, okay, it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to start by saying this thing is important to me. Maybe a member of your family has got poorly and you need some time out. Like, you need, I don't know, to finish early one day and start earlier the next. You're not asking for the moon. You're just asking, listen, I need a bit of flexibility because I need to go and take this person to a doctor's appointment. And that is so important for you. And if you feel supported in asking that, and the bosses are a little bit more flexible than perhaps they can be, that is worth its weight in gold, I think.
I absolutely agree with you, but I think the most important thing out of all of that is that you feel that your testimony, the words that you're talking, the things that you're saying are heard and they're received. I think what happens a lot of the time is, because the job can be stressful and there can be staffing issues, and there can be, like I've talked about with CQC and local authorities and everything coming down on a manager at the same time.
Yeah.
There can be a tendency to go, oh, well, you've asked for this thing, but I don't know. I'm going to say no, not because I have any reason, but because I feel like I need to say no, because then everyone will ask for the same favor or whatever.
Yeah,
But actually
exactly.
you can make reasonable adjustments for people who just have, a funeral to go to, or have a really
Something
important
going on in their
birthday
life.
for
Yeah.
a young one, and it's okay, and not every staff member is going to be entitled to that because you've given it to one. And I think it's just allowing managers to have that flexibility and say that's all right, and you're not going to be in trouble with HR. But what
Yeah,
are the other barriers that you found with getting that mental health support?
I suppose that, so we've covered the stigma. In the beginning, I wouldn't say boo to a goose. I wouldn't talk to anyone or ask for help in my career. But now I just, yeah, utilize it. I haven't found, in terms of barriers, I suppose, yeah, will be stigma, embarrassment, um, and then sometimes the response you get, yeah, you can be, if you're vulnerable because you're feeling not that great and you feel sensitive asking, it's not really great if you get a negative response, so I think managers could sometimes do with a bit more training themselves in how to deal with people who are going through crises, because life is not easy for any of us, and life is not easy for the whole world at the moment. And then plus on top of that, we've got the cost of living crisis, which means if you go off sick, and a lot of these care providers pay minimum wage, and then you only get statutory sick pay when you're off sick. So if you do have some sickness that you need to take, no one takes it so they can go on holiday to Barbados. Well, I don't anyway. But just people who need sick leave because they're having to make the decision to drag themselves into work because they can't live off the statutory sick pay, and they've got families to feed. And, this is a decision that's going through people's mind every day, and forcing themselves to do extra shifts as well. As I said, it's the goodwill of staff. And it's not just goodwill, it's the fact that they need the money because of the cost of living now.
Absolutely. And I think it happened, we recognized it a little bit in the pandemic when people were uh, weren't being paid when they had to isolate. And then people were just coming in regardless because they were like, well, I'm not going to get paid.
Yeah.
And then obviously the issues with that. And we've kind of forgotten the importance that is in general, just allowing people to rest and recover, and supporting that financially. So that's a really important point, I think, around that. This has been so good talking to you around this subject, and I kind of want to leave some time if there's anything specific that we haven't mentioned for you to bring up around mental health or well-being.
Yeah, so I would find that basically there's another analogy that I just want to say, that someone once told me that when a mum and a baby or a mum and a child are on an aeroplane and they're going through turbulence, and the person who's doing, the air hostess is doing the talk, and they say, if their oxygen masks come down, put on yours first before you put on your child's. Now that completely goes against a mother's instinct, but actually if they didn't do that, they wouldn't be able to save their child because they'd lose oxygen and they'd lose consciousness. So they have to do that, put on theirs first before they put on their child's. And that is a good analogy for care work, because you can't give the best care possible if you're not supported. You can't give the best care possible if you don't have an avenue to debrief, to talk to, and it's not rocket science putting those things in place. So yeah, that's just my final thing.
It's a fabulous point, and it was actually something that came to me because I've just come back from a family holiday in Spain, and that always gets mentioned. If you're with a child, make sure you put your mask on first. And I just thought, how am I going to get myself to do that? Because, like you say, the instinct is the child needs it. It's so hard to
Yeah,
stop and say, no, I need this first. But I think that's why that they repeat it on every single flight you go
yeah,
on. So even if you fly as a profession because you have to be in different countries every week, you're going to hear the message again and again. And I think that is the usefulness as well of your analogy, is because we need to be reminded that we need to look after our mental health and well-being. It's not something that we can just say, right, we're doing this, we're going to do a once a year training. It just needs to be through the staff teams regularly. We need to advocate, we need to be putting it in staff meetings, we need those debriefs to remind us to look after the mental well-being of ourselves, and maybe even look out for our colleagues, because our instinct, like you said, in care, we are there by job description, but also by passion and
yeah.
values. to look after somebody else.
Because
So
it's a
for
vocation, yeah.
yes,
Caring is a vocation, and when you do it, you do everything you can for the people you support. And yet, it will take a lot of getting used to. If they decide to ever take it further, put things in place with Andy Burnham making these priorities for the care workers, and if mental health well-being is going to be part of that, I think we'll need as carers a lot of re-education, because we don't, and it's not to get rid of that, because that vocational bit is so important, and it's not to get rid of the sacrifice either, because we will always have to sacrifice things for other people, because that's what we do, and that's why we give such good care. But it's just bringing alongside that this little thing that says, okay, yeah, you're brilliant, you're fantastic, you're helping all these people, but how are you?
absolutely. Oh, so many takeaways from this session. I've made a list of all of the action points. You can't really see it because of since this conversation, and I've been in this business for ages. But it's just reminding myself, you need to do this, you need to do that. So thank you so much. I'm going to just bring in Olivia to see if she'd like to add anything else, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Olivia.
Hello, I was just listening to all of that, and I really don't know if there's anything else that I can add. I think everything that Liz spoke to is so true, and kind of sharing her experiences as well. And I just think it's something that at the Care Workers Charity we continue to champion, which is that, we cannot expect care workers to go out and deliver outstanding care if they themselves are not cared for. And it really goes back to that human element, that recognizing, like Liz said, this sector has run for so long on the goodwill of care workers, and it's not strategically possible anymore, because care workers are human beings too. They deserve to have rests, they deserve to have breaks, they deserve to be able to look after their own mental health. So I think that's probably my final point. I can't, there's nothing else that I can add to what Liz said, because I just think everything that she said just really hit the nail on the head.
It really did, and I appreciate both of you coming on. And you're always so good at closing things out and summarising, Olivia. It's just a great way with words. But we're almost at the hour now, so I will let you both go while I give a couple of updates. But thank you for all the work that you're doing around this subject, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and great advice with us today. So goodbye, both of you, for now. Great. So that was just such a fantastic talk about mental well-being, and I really hope that everybody else got some nuggets of things and advice that they want to take forward. Obviously, the Care Workers Charity is doing a lot in this space, and it has reminded me that there is that consultancy, consultation side of it, therapy side of it online that they can offer. So make sure that you go onto their website and that you explore that. And also, I think it's really important to keep this subject in the headlines, but also amongst the decision makers. So as some of you might know, Co-Produced Care is doing a care sector call every month, and the next one we're having is on the 19th of August, in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll be talking around workers' rights. So I've actually just had an email from the Home Office, and I think it says that they're going to try and get someone on the call. We also have a few others. So we've got James Sage, a fantastic senior partner at a law firm, and he'll be talking about some of the legal changes of the Employment Rights Act that are coming in October. And also we have Vic Rayner, who will be talking about workers' experiences in care, and that should be a fantastic set. We also have someone from a union, because obviously there's lots of changes around unionship membership, with the new act that's coming in. So we've got quite a long list of people who are going to be joining that call. I know people say it's often too packed, but I can't help myself. I just feel like these subjects are important. So do try and come along, and if you're on our mailing list, you'll get an invite straight to your inbox. So make sure that you're on our mailing list, and we'll pop a link for that in the description and in the chat now. But also I'm really excited for the September care sector call, because we are going to be trying to feed in some information to that big conversation on care that the Prime Minister announced not too long ago. So that's a screenshot, so it's on my tabs at the top, but just concentrating on, there's a website and they're looking for people's opinions on how care needs to be funded, what needs to change in care. And I just love the fact that it is just a conversation. We're starting off with a conversation, and we have been conversating about care for I don't know how many decades. So finally it's on the political agenda. It is not an opportunity that anyone should in this sector at least should pass up. So make sure that you are either in tune with that and plugging into the website, or you are at least coming to our care sector call in September, where we'll have I'm hoping to get some MPs on there as well. We're talking about the conversation around care, and we're going to record that conversation we're going to be having on Microsoft Teams, and we'll be creating a report which we will then feed through to Downing Street. So make sure that you join that as well. So the real call to action is to join the mailing list, because not only will you find out about all the things we're doing with that call, you'll also find out the subjects that we're going to cover with this care sector, the Care Workers Hour. So this has been great, and what we're trying to do is bring care workers on every single month to talk about an issue which has been voted by them. So we actually put out a ask to the Care Workers Charity, to their network, to see what topics do they want to be covered. So the topics that we talk about are not co-produced care topics. These are all topics that care workers have asked to be covered on this Care Workers Hour. So we've tried to be as co-productive as possible. The next one will be again next month, and you can get information if you join our mailing list. And I know that the Care Workers Charity will also send it to their members and people they've supported. So a lot to take in. It's 1:02. I need to get to my next thing. I'm sure you need to get to your next thing too. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and we really look forward to seeing you here again next month for the next Care Workers Hour. Thank you. Take care.